So from the moment the coronavirus pandemic hit Nigeria, President Buhari swung into action by raising a committee to look at its effect on our economy. That was one. Then a presidential task force on COVID-19 headed by the SGF was inaugurated, and another special committee was set up by the NEC to coordinate the federal and state government's response to COVID-19 that is headed by the vice president. So it's about a month now since the index case was discovered, and today there are 49 active cases with a possibility of other cases still undetected. The question is, are we winning the battle against COVID-19? What is it thinking of the presidency at this time? And how are the needs of Nigerians being factored in? Big questions there. So let's speak with Mr. Femi Adesina, who's a media advisor to the president. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good evening, Mr. Adesina, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Good evening.
You know, it's easy to get carried away with all the, reports about COVID-19 without checking on one another. So let me begin from there on a lighter note. How are you holding up? How are you doing at this time?
Very well, to the glory of God.
Well, I also imagine that this has affected the operations at the villa. Yesterday, you mentioned the partial lockdown in your words. But then we understand that the nation is not on lockdown. More than any time, we need to actually work right now. So I'm just curious, and a lot of Nigerians are curious, how is the presidency conducting day-to-day operations? I imagine you have to hold, meetings with the task force on COVID-19, with other members of the executive arm. How is the presidency going about this at this time?
Well, things are fairly on a low key in the presidency because the entire country also is on a low key. You can't say we are running at full blast now. Instead of holding meetings where you sit around the table, you can do virtual meetings. You can consult and contact one another in different ways. You don't have to hold the meeting that we used to in the normal way when we all sit around the table. But things are low-key.
Reports emerged earlier on today that the president's, the villa was being disinfected or fumigated, and that's out there in the media. I'd just like to get a confirmation from you. Is that indeed true?
It's a normal thing. It's done from time to time. It's the villa is under a retainership. People that keep it clean, that fumigate from time to time. So there's nothing extraordinary about it.
All right. So how is the president's chief of staff doing at this time? That's also one thing I would like to get clarification on.
No, obviously you listened to the Minister of Health earlier in the day when he briefed. He didn't confirm. He just said an aide to the president. So I wouldn't be mentioning names.
Well, I'm not asking you. I'm just asking about the president's chief of staff. How is it doing? I asked you about your health. You said you were fine. So how is the chief of staff also doing, if you know?
Because I have not seen him for a couple of days, so I wouldn't be able to tell you that this is how he is. If you ask me about the president was still in the office yesterday, I will tell you, yes, Mr. President is doing fine.
Mr. Adesina, I'm sure you're aware of the news out there about the Chief of Staff's state of health. Of course, we wish everybody the best at this time, but it's important, to have some form of clarification on this matter. And people are wondering, is the presidency keeping mum on this deliberately?
No, you also need to remember that it's a question of ethics. If the health minister, who is a reputed medical doctor, came out to brief and he didn't mention names, it tells you that it's in the realm of ethics. Anybody passing through a health condition is the one that can authorize that it be revealed. Nobody else, not even a doctor treating that person, dare reveal it, otherwise he will be breaching the ethics. So, Prince Charles, for instance, tested positive. He said, reveal it, disclose it. And a statement was issued to that effect. He authorized it. Our vice president tested negative, and he said, disclose it. And his media aide disclosed it. So that is the way it is done, ethically.
Right. So as a matter of closure, because Mr. Adesina, you'll agree with me that this is still on. A lot of people are speculating about that. In fact, different theories. And I recall you said that Nigerians like conspiracy theories. As a matter of closure on this, what would you be telling Nigerians?
I'll be telling Nigerians that we are part of the global community. The world has an emergency, has a crisis. The world is battling it with each country trying as much as it could within its capacity. Nigeria is part of that global community. The country is doing its best. Let's stay focused. Let's continue to battle this virus, which is a common enemy of humanity. And let's leave little things aside and face the major thing.
Right. Now, speaking of one of the major things, we've looked around. You said this is a global war. Definitely. We see, how countries are responding to this. And, of course, how Nigeria is responding, which has been commended in some quarters. But one thing a lot of people are still worried about is the fact that they don't see daily briefings from president, for example. I mean, you look around other nations and you see how the leaders, brief the citizens on a daily basis. And it begs the question, why does it appear as though the president does not want to brief the nation on a daily basis about this, or at least regularly?
It's a matter of style. If we go back to school, you remember in stylistics class, we were told that style is idiosyncratic, which means it differs from person to person. The style that A adopts may not be the one that B adopts, and there is no style that you can call the style for everybody. So everybody is at liberty to adopt a style that suits him.
Right.
The style our president has adopted is to set up a presidential task force headed by the secretary to the government of the federation, which briefs regularly. You have the health minister, who briefs. You have the Minister of State Health, who also briefs. You have the NCDC, National Center for Disease Control, they brief.
Mr. Adesina,
you have that chain.
A moment, that's understandable.
There is no lack of information.
That's understandable. But, Nigerians will cast their minds back to the period of the 2019 election campaign, where the president actually spoke to Nigerians at every point during that campaign. And they're wondering, what happened to the love? Has the love been lost? Sort of.
No, there are two incommensurate. Campaign is campaign. This you cannot parallel with a campaign. This is about a day-to-day affair of the country. No, you can't compare the two. If it becomes imperative for the president himself to speak, he will speak. But the president's style is that when he gives you an assignment, he leaves you to do it. There are people that he has set up in committees, in task forces, in groups, and they are doing the work, and they keep Nigerians abreast with developments. So he lets them do it.
All right, Mr. Femi Adesina, I would like to thank you so much. We understand that you probably have some other work to do, but thank you for the update on at least the president's response to COVID-19 as it stands right now. Well, we'll go on a break, and when we return, we'll shift our attention to the National Assembly. There's been some moves to ease the burden on Nigerians, especially in this very seemingly difficult period. It's called the Emergency Economic Stimulus Bill. What does it mean for you and I? Find out in a moment. Join us again.
Honorable Yusuf, give us a sense of what happened on the floor today. Some of your colleagues are saying we need to shut the borders, perhaps half the influx of foreigners into the country, or the flights that come into the country. What was the sense behind those suggestions made by lawmakers today?
Simple. The consequence of not taking decisive action early will be very there and will be very, very devastating. That's why lawmakers took that position today. The data available, countries that have been able to take decisive decision early have been able to come out of the crisis or curtail the crisis better than others. who didn't take that route. The Asian countries like Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea have been touted today as good example. Italy, now Britain gradually did exactly what we are doing. Even America were tentative. And if you go to the American public today, there's agitation every day that the government is not doing enough. I think we need to take a more proactive action because I don't believe that Nigeria has the capacity to weather the challenge of coronavirus and the consequence. China spent over $260-something billion so far. The Nigeria budget is about $20-something billion at the age of maybe 30, 31 at most. If China spends $260-something billion to contain the coronavirus, you can imagine if we find ourselves in that situation. I want to appeal, use this privileged position, that we should begin to restrict movement of people from certain countries now. Nigeria has an international airport in Kano, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and some of that. And our borders are very, very, very porous. I pray we do not have a situation where neighboring countries within Nigeria, in West Africa, become affected. We will not be able to manage it. So, as it is today, yes, we don't have much report of coronavirus. But I have feared that the more we just allow people from these countries to come in, we might not. I pray it doesn't happen. So I am of the opinion that the House of Rep position this today is valid, is timely. Let's begin to restrict certain movement. Other African countries are doing the same. We are not saying, hey, we don't want you here, but for this period, so as to help us curtail this. So I think the House of Reps came up with that position based on these data available. I read through a lot of those reports from Asian countries, and I listen every day the World Health Organization report, and the simple logic is restrict movement, test, 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 and test. Do we have the capacity to do the kind of test is required? If about 1 million people want to do tests in Nigeria, do we have the capacity? I don't believe we have it. So we should take precaution, restrict movement of people from these countries that have high rates of coronavirus today. That is my submission. That is what the House of Reps decided today.
All right, let's take a breather. And when we come back, Mr. Adesina will tell us more about the decision of the president going forward and whether or not there will be a policy change in terms of what the lawmakers think and keeping Nigerians safe, not only health-wise, but in terms of the monies in the pocket of Nigerians. Mr. Adesina might also be able to hint on what the Economic Advisory Council thought or are thinking about the state government and the possibility of government in those states not being able to pay salaries. That's going to be after this break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. And let's get back to the conversation. Mr. Femi Adesina, Special Advisor in Media to President Muhammadu Buhari, has been talking to us about what went down at the meeting of the President and the Economic Advisory Council. Honorable Tajuddin Yusuf is a member of the House of Representatives who was there also at the floor today to give us a sense of what is happening and what the lawmakers said. He spoke to us earlier before we went on that break. Let me get back to Mr. Adesina. For example, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, PDP presidential candidate, is suggesting a reduction in the pump price of fuel and some other measures that can cushion the effect such that an average Nigerian is not feeling the effect of coronavirus. In France, the government there have announced cushioning effect to help average citizen to be able to get buffer. In the United States, in Germany, in so many countries, they are announcing buffers for their citizens. Is there any immediate buffer that was announced by President Buhari today, considering the fact that people are already feeling the pinch and the crunch of the coronavirus impact?
Well, you can't compare Nigeria with those countries that have announced the buffers. We are blessed of God. We have had only 3 cases. 1 has got out of it. The 3rd one was just discovered today. Like I said earlier, it's not time to press the panic button. When buffers will come, it will come. Like President Buhari said at that meeting, every appropriate step will be taken, not only to protect Nigerians, but also to preserve their economic well-being. Don't also forget that Nigeria is not in the best of shape economically. The economy is just being rebuilt, is growing. It may be slow, but it's growing. The economy is growing. So it's not as if we have all the reserves that you can use as buffer. But the president has assured that everything will be done to keep and preserve not only the health, but also the economic well-being of Nigeria.
Mr. Adesina, what was being said at that meeting regarding, we know we have a depleted sovereign wealth fund account, we have a depleted excess crude account. Obviously, there might be some issues as regarding what state government gets from the monthly federal allocation that goes into some of these states. There might be problem of paying salaries. Is there any consideration for these states and how the food on the table of an average Nigerian can be secured?
Yes, what the Economic Advisory Council did was scenario painting. It painted several scenarios that could come up if the COVID-19 situation persists. And one of the scenarios it painted was that revenue will drop drastically, as low as half of what we get now. Therefore, monies available to federal, state, and local governments will also dwindle by as much as half. If that happens, we know that there will be the challenge of paying salaries. But it doesn't come. It's a likely scenario.
No, but when that scenario was painted, Mr. Adesina, apologies about it. When that scenario was painted, what is the move or the step or policy decision they are thinking about in making sure that the worst cannot happen?
There are certain things you don't begin to panic over because it hasn't happened. It's just a scenario that was painted. And the Advisory Council said that should it happen, then states will run to the federal again for bailouts. So it's not as if it has happened, but the likelihood has been raised. And if it now happens, it depends on what is available to the federal government. In the past, don't forget that the federal government bailed out states. In 2015, 2016, states were bailed out several times. So it's also not unlikely.
But if there is one major policy decision that was made out of that meeting today, Mr. Adesina, as a crucial decision, what would you say that that decision is?
No. You are asking me to second guess what will happen.
No, I'm not asking you to second guess. I told you. I'm saying what was the policy decision, the concrete policy decision that was made? No, I'm not second guessing. I'm saying what is the policy decision that was made today?
No, I just hope you let me talk. Now, that scenario was painted, and the Advisory Council said if it happens, the states may then run to federal government for bailout. And I'm saying that, yes, the states were bailed out before because the federal government had the resources. So if this happens again and the resources are available, be sure that the federal government will do the needful. President Buhari said at that meeting that the welfare of the people is a concern of the government.
All right. Honorable Yusuf, there is consideration of an adjustment in the budget. Was that considered also, and what would be the next step from the lawmakers' point of view?
Definitely, if the president brings such, the lawmaker will look at it on his merit. However, I have a bit of worry when we say it's not yet happening. The price of crude is already half the price. And by implication, our earning that in the next 1 month is already going to be affected. By implication, we are already in it. Not that we're looking at maybe we'll be there or not. I want to believe that the economic advisory team with men of, seasoned economists and what have you. However, we need to act fast on the coronavirus restriction so that we don't get to a level that we are in serious crisis and we are running helter-skelter. As it is today, the budget has about 2.9 billion trillion capital component. We have debt service of about 2 trillion debt servicing. By implication, we are already underperforming capital. And capital is what reflects the economy. So the position of the advisory committee saying that play down, reduce concurrent expenditure and focus on capital. Unfortunately, we've not been able to. I've been privileged to be in the House reasonably and to know that we do, at best we'll do between 40-50 of our capital, even when things are not this bad. And unfortunately, again, we have borrowed so much in recent time. Borrowing is not bad. Borrowing is not bad. What is bad is that when you borrow for frivolities, that is not tied to a specific project, like the present borrowing that is on the table. I am not comfortable with NTA on that borrowing plan. I feel they should be, and I believe that now that we have this challenge now, that borrowing should be reviewed. Take away NTA and let NTA go and compete with China's AIT and what have you on the stock market and get funding. And let's take these resources into areas that will reflect the economy, because what government do, what economies do is that when you have this kind of challenge, you spend more. When you spend more, then you borrow to spend so that the down to the non-common man, we have 1 or 2 things to do. If you are in the road between Ibadan and Lagos now, every community within those areas, we have...
Honorable, we have to go because we're out of time. But I must sincerely thank you for your thought and some of the insight that you shared tonight, as well as Mr. Femi Adesina, the special advisor to the President of Media and Publicity. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. But that's our show, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm sure Kimale. Bye-bye.